Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dragon Talk. I am Greg Tito today.
Yeah, you are.
Today, just today.
I love it.
Tomorrow, I'm going to be someone else
Can't
because
wait.
I will be playing this game.
That's right, because
But-
we'll be playing. I don't know who you'll be.
Who are you
I'm Shelly Mazanoble today.
today?
Tomorrow, I too will be someone else.
Someone totally new. We have two amazing guests here who I don't think are going to be changing. You're going to be the same tomorrow as you are today?
That's the current plan.
Okay, good. So we have Zach Lauren Clark.
That's me. Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Zach. And
Hello.
Nick Eliopoulos. Is that right?
Hi there.
That's an excellent name.
Thank you. I'm fond of it.
Really good.
Did I pronounce it at least slightly correctly?
Yeah. That's definitely within the right
So
area.
the range of acceptable.
We allow some variation in how the vowels are pronounced. So.
Nice. That's good. As being D&D fans, I'm sure you're okay with people mispronouncing things that they've only read and not ever said out loud.
We don't even agree on many of the pronunciations in our own books, so we're
Yes.
totally fine with whatever you go with.
Wow. All right. So you guys are friends and authors, co-authors.
Co-authors, yeah.
Yes.
Of a new
Yeah,
series.
we've been best friends for something like 14 years, and we've been playing Dungeons and Dragons together for something like 10 years. And as of a few years ago, we've been writing partners as well, and we work collaboratively on our novel series, basically taking turns on chapters and passing chapters back and forth.
Sort of in the spirit of cooperative storytelling that
Yeah.
comes from D&D gaming.
Right.
I've always heard of this happening in theory, but to actually see that it works, like, that's amazing.
And I mean, in some ways, it's much easier because I get credit for having written a book while I've only actually done the writing on half of the book, which is really great. I have a lot of unfinished novels, and it turns out that the trick to finishing was to only do half. Of the
Just
work.
have a friend help you.
Yeah.
Well, I particularly love that your bio is always that you guys specify that you're best friends.
Oh yeah, so it's very important.
Everywhere I read, it's like they are best friends.
And I think if you're going to write a novel with a buddy, it has to be the best friend.
But it could also go terribly awry. Like they say, like you should never
Right,
like
for
do
sure.
business with friends for that very reason. But it seems like it's worked out for you guys.
We have many years of cooperative storytelling through tabletop gaming under
Right.
our belts before we figured this was even like a safe endeavor to try.
Right.
But it's worked out okay, yeah.
That's good.
And
I was,
Yeah.
what's really funny to me about it is that part of the reason that's part of our bio and sort of part of our story as authors is that the characters we're writing in our books are best friends as well.
Yeah.
oh.
As we're getting into later books in the series, there is a lot of strain in the friendship. So we're sort of constantly, maybe even secretly hoping for more conflict between us. Because
Right.
we think that, update the bio for the last book with, oh, they used to be best friends.
They are former friends.
But now they hate each other's guts.
Yes.
So when you're writing, when you're passing chapters back and forth, are you each taking on the perspective of one of the characters, or are you just whatever feels like coming out comes out?
Yeah, we really kind of treated it like a D&D game. We did some front-loaded world building when we got started with the series, and then based on this document that we had, we each created a character. And I think the prompt was Nick just said, create your character, jump into the world, and go. And that's kind of what I did. I wrote a first chapter. I knew some basic ideas of who his character was. But then I passed it to him with a cliffhanger, and it was his turn to pick it up from there.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So out of those 14 years, you guys have always been best friends? There was never any time that you weren't?
We're really gonna like harp.
We're
on
gonna
this
dig
stuff,
in.
but
We're
by
gonna
the
dig
end
in.
of this hour, you're not gonna be friends.
You needed
There was
conflict,
a
right?
Period where Zach was living in Florida and I was in New York, and we were not really best friends at that point. But we kept in touch, and unfortunately, Zach ended up in New York as well, so we were able to pick up where we left off.
I'm glad you were able to escape
Yeah.
the clutches of the swamps of Florida.
Right.
Oh man, we're happy to be here for sure. Although it's a little swampy outside in New York tonight.
Yes.
So yeah, you guys said you're in Brooklyn. What neighborhood?
We're currently at my place in Park Slope, a little west of the park.
And I live south of the park in Ditmas Park,
Oh, I love Ditmas. I have a friend.
one part of Brooklyn that has the nice Victorian home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend who lives down there, and that was going to visit her was always hard because you'd have to be on like the N train or the Q, and you're
The
going
Q
on
now,
it for a
yeah.
long time. And then I was
Yes.
like, where are we? This is not New. How can this be Brooklyn still?
Something's wrong.
There's houses with sidewalks and bushes and trees and landscaping, and it makes no sense.
It's definitely a trade-off.
Yeah, that's cool. So the west of Park Slope. So the actual I was thinking east of it, but you're thinking the actual real Park Slope area. I like that as well. That's
Yeah, it's a really. I'm very new to the neighborhood, but it's beautiful, and I've got a dog who absolutely adores the park. So we get out there with her as much as we can.
sweet. Yeah, being that close to a big Prospect Park is ideal when you're when you're city living.
Yep.
Yeah, it can
Green
be a real
space.
challenge getting our D&D group together sometimes, though, because the difference between living sort of 5 or 6 or 7 stops out in Brooklyn
Mhm.
versus friends who are on the Upper East Side or the West Side. That's been sort of a lot of our story as D&D players in New York has been the constant renegotiation of where we're going to meet.
Yeah.
And initially, we actually got started. We had to meet in public spaces because no one had a private space large enough to accommodate the game. So our very earliest sessions were quite in the open in various food courts and such.
We did this job interview sort of in character for our first D&D game in a giant food court, and it was a little mortifying, but also kind of a blast. It was a great way to just jump right in.
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, when I was there was a specific lunch place that was only open basically during lunchtime in Midtown, right? And then they realized that they still had, it was like basically convenience store level of stuff and then once they opened it up to gamers to come in, they had all this evening business.
Nice.
Because there were basically people come in, buy soda or drinks or snacks or whatever, and they open the doors kind of
That's
reluctantly.
kinda genius.
Yeah, but I was like, oh gosh, why don't more places in Midtown do this?
It's smart because, like you said, like a lot of people in New York don't have places big enough
Big spaces,
to have groups
right.
of people over. So
Yeah.
it's kind of genius.
The only way the most time that I played in New York was a friend of mine in the Upper West Side who he rented an apartment just to play D&D in.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is commitment.
Yeah, he was uber rich and his wife was had a great job and didn't like that we were invading
He
their
had his
apartment.
own He could
Yeah.
like Airbnb that as like just come play your
It was
games
before
here.
the days of
Airbnb it by the
Airbnb.
hour.
Yeah. It wasn't that big. I mean, it was a studio, so it was about the size of
Yeah,
this
but
room.
That's all you're doing in there.
That's all we needed. I fit a big table. I think he even got one of the Geek Chic tables at one point.
That's so decadent.
And it was just in there. And we went and we played D&D there.
Like
It was
gaming
fantastic.
apartment.
The gaming apartment. Yeah, it was fantastic. But it was the only way to really make it work.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very hard.
So who is this group that you guys are playing with? How long have you been playing with them?
We've been playing with the same dungeon master for the 10 years that we've been playing. I think it's actually we decided it was 9 years.
Yeah,
We sometimes the documents
almost a decade.
So some people have joined and some people have left over the course of that time, but we've got sort of the same core group of guys.
And as we were actually writing our book, the book sort of takes place in almost a fantasy-like world, almost Lord of the Rings-like and Dungeons and Dragons-like, and we have these sort of historical heroes that are a big part of the story of what happened to this world, and we named them after our earliest adventuring crew.
Aww.
Imagined that they had bungled big time in a way that ended the world before the book even started.
That's cool.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's
And because
very...
it's New York, pretty much everyone in the group is either a lawyer or working in publishing or writing in some capacity. So it's a really kind of fun balance of the super creative and the super sort of rules driven.
A little antagonistic.
Rules lawyering. It's a
Yep.
thing.
It really
Actual
quite
lawyers
literally.
like
Yes.
doing it. It's weird.
You need to have every game group needs an actual lawyer.
I like it when the lawyers play against type, though, and they're the ones who are like, I don't care what the rules are. I'm chaotic
This is my
evil.
release. I'm off the clock, man.
I'm off the clock.
So why don't you tell us about your series? I don't even know if we've mentioned the name.
I was just
of
going
it.
to say,
I'm
we have not
sorry.
mentioned the title. It's an amorphous
What's the
thing.
name of the series that we keep talking about?
It's a little hard to pronounce. It's the Adventurers Guild.
Oh,
Where is the apostrophe?
yeah.
That's the
you
very
need
important.
A few apostrophes.
There's
really.
no apostrophe.
What?
We debated
So
this
many
for
arguments
years.
about the
Yes.
apostrophe with our
We-
editor, with our agents.
Yeah, you don't technically need it. You could argue it either way, and we could certainly get into the details if you'd like.
Well,
but
as I just want, before we move on from the apostrophe, that is a very important thing in D&D as well. We always have that conversation of like, where is it going to be? If you notice our most recent Guild Masters Guide to Ravnica, the apostrophe is after the S. It's the
Right.
Oh, right.
plural
Yes.
possessive.
And that was another possibility for the Adventurers Guild too, because there are many
There are
adventurers
multiple
in this
adventurers.
guild, or is it a guild for each adventurer? And we decided we just wanted to circumvent the entire issue and just no
True.
apostrophe.
But sadly, I'm still making you talk about it. I'm so sorry.
Never gonna.
But yes, so it is a middle grade fantasy adventure series. So target ages anywhere from 8 to 13 or so. And it's a trilogy. So the first book came out about a year ago, and the second book just came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the setup?
Yeah, so I mentioned that it takes place in sort of almost a Lord of the Rings Dungeons and Dragons world. There's knights and wizards and monsters, but we wanted to give it a little bit of a twist, so we went post-apocalyptic. And that 200 years ago, a ritual happened. These four heroes, their friend was trying to barter for more power, and accidentally ended up opening the world to every plane of existence beyond it. And from these planes, monsters spilled in. They took over. They kind of slaughtered the whole face of this world, except for a few cities that now remain. And no one really leaves the safety of these cities anymore. They live these very sequestered lives, except in our main city, Freestone, there's one guild, the Adventurers Guild, whose job it is to go outside and explore and fight the monsters that are out there.
So we were obviously really inspired, like sort of in the very core of the concept is that idea of the points of light.
Yeah.
Like the cities that are surrounded by wilderness. And we just wanted to push that to extremes and just imagine there are points of light, but there's only 5 points of light left in the entire world, and everything else is super, super dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's really where we started.
I dig that. That's at the core of what all D&D is to a certain extent, that there was this powerful society that somehow collapsed. It doesn't matter how, but somehow it collapsed, and then that's why there's dungeons and powerful artifacts and things hidden underground from the ancient magic that was there.
Right.
And of course the monsters.
And of course the
Lots of
monsters.
monsters. The monsters are really at the heart of everything that we're doing.
Right.
What kinds of monsters are they?
All kinds of monsters. So book 2, which just came out, is specifically our undead book.
Ooh.
It's called Twilight of the Elves. And you find that one of the other few cities that are out there, the Elven city, has fallen to a lich. So the elves sort of come to Freestone for help. They're pursued by the undead hordes.
And as we were crafting the world, we figured out what each of these planes beyond the world were, and figured out what kinds of monsters we would want to be interacting with over the course of the series, and figured out which of these planes might they come from. So we've got this whole document that like 20, 25 pages or something that's just full of facts about the world, and there are specific places that these monsters come from, and hopefully we get to glimpse as many of them as possible.
That's pretty cool.
Are the main characters, are there just 2 of them, or is there like a whole party of adventurers?
Yeah, well, we really started with just the 2 who are our point of view characters. So Zach is writing from the viewpoint of Zed, who is a half elf. He's a sorcerer, so he's one of the few people in this town who has sort of like a natural connection to magic. And my main character is Brock, who is a human boy. They're best friends, like I said. Brock is essentially our rogue character. He's the sweet talker, charmer, who will also sort of pick your pocket while he's so we started with that, and then naturally you start kind of building a larger party as you're going. And Zach and I, as we passed chapters back and forth, we would create additional characters as we needed them. And sometimes it would be little more than a name. Sometimes you get a name and a personality trait, and then the next person, whoever's turn it was to write the next chapter, would sort of layer on top of them. So we ended up actually, like, our favorite characters in the books aren't even the 2 that we started with.
Right, yeah.
We have Liza, who is the girl who wanted to be a knight in this world, but she ends up in the Adventurers Guild. So she kind of is the de facto leader of the recruits of the 12-year-olds who joined the Adventurers Guild. And she's a joy to write, because she doesn't have any of the hang-ups that Zed has. She doesn't have Brock's sort of overconfidence and arrogance. So she's actually one of our favorites to write.
Ooh, it
Another
sounds like
one is
she should get her own
we
book.
created the sort of guild master of the adventurers together, and it's one of the, I think, really truly collaborative characters that we each added bits and pieces to. And somehow over the course of the series, we kind of felt like she became our anti-Dumbledore. In the way that Dumbledore is this very warm, wise, compassionate leader of Hogwarts, and he really wants to like take care of Harry and make sure that the kids are all cared for. Alabazel Frond, who's the head of the adventurers, is just this tough as nails, like a little bit disgusting, like rude, crude woman who is like constantly spitting everywhere. The Adventurers Guild Hall is filled with these like half-full spittoons that she's
gross.
just she became this character that started out a little bit villainous, but really cares for the kids in a way that I think you only slowly realize over the course of the series.
And even writing it, I only slowly realized I thought we were writing a villain when we introduced her, and she's ended up being my favorite hero of the group.
Wow. Interesting how that happens. They kind of tell their own story.
Yeah,
right.
in a lot of ways. And also just, again, writing with a partner, you don't always know what they're going to add to the character. You can come in with certain ideas, but until we actually got the ideas down on the page, it was all sort of unformed.
Yeah, so did you guys have like an outline before you wrote this, or was it really just kind of like...
Yeah, we decided not to start with an outline.
I could tell from his grimace, your grimace, that you were like,
Yeah, I know. This is not how writers should do it. I am not advocating this.
I'm a big outliner, and Nick is not. I think Nick enjoyed the spontaneity of not knowing what was coming ahead, and it always makes me a little bit nervous. We started just totally improv. We knew some basic rules about the world and went back and forth. And then at some point we realized as we were writing that there was a mystery, and we both had to know where this mystery was going. So at that point, we did some very light outlining. We took a beginning and an end, and everything in between there we figured out as we went.
And it really was chapter by chapter. Like you did a chapter, you did one back and forth, back and forth. And what would you do if you got a chapter? Like say, Zach, you got a chapter back from Nick, and you were like, "Oh hell no, this isn't not what I thought." What do you do?
3 months ago, we would have told you this never happened, and we played it like a game of yes and you just had to sort of keep rolling with things. But in writing, we're actually revising our third book right now, the third book in the trilogy, and ran up against, I think, the very first instance where you introduced a story beat. Nick told me as he sent me the chapter, like, listen, I don't know what you're going to think about this. It might be problematic. Why don't you read it and sleep on it, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. And I read it, and I slept on it.
And he hated it. He hated it so much.
And I called Nick, and I kind of, it was a little bit of a blur, the conversation, but I just remember apologizing. Like I felt bad that I didn't like it, and I felt bad that I had ruined our narrative of like never having an argument over the fight, over the story.
But we're actually, we're going around and we're talking to schools, to classes of kids and stuff, and I think it's actually more valuable that we can say we had disagreements. And
it would be weird if you didn't, really.
Right.
Yeah, right?
That's like meeting a couple who've been married for 50 years and like, we never have fought ever, nor have we ever hung out with each other.
We don't live together.
We don't live together. We sleep in slipper beds thousands of miles away, but we've never fought. It's fantasy. So it's interesting that, you guys had that fantasy of like, oh, we're going to be these best friends and work on this together and never have any conflict. And so maybe that's why Shelly and I were trying to get you guys to get conflict right away.
I know, because we don't understand it.
That doesn't make any sense.
No way.
Shelly hates me most of the time.
Obviously.
We remember very fondly a moment in writing the first book where for the first time, I gave Zach a cliffhanger that really stumped him. And I remember the text that he sent where he said, "Hey man, great chapter, good job. Do you have any idea, how the characters get out of this one?" I got to think, no. I was like, this is the game.
It's not that I've
your
never
chapter sucker.
But we rolled with it for the most part.
Right.
Wow, but that's so interesting, writing a novel sequentially like that, especially one that has these different point of view characters. I mean, that's part of, I have many unfinished fantasy novels as well, Nick.
Right.
But that was always
one of them to.
I need. Well,
you.
is there room for a third and a fourth? Do you want to join in?
Yeah, why not?
Start. You could be Liza.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's gonna get her own book. I can tell. So.
She actually needs one.
Yeah. Isn't that how? Didn't Bob Salvatore tell us that Dritz was originally a sidekick?
Yeah, he was just a side character.
Yeah. So and yeah.
It's true. So crazy things can come, but
Yes.
that's amazing that it was this sequential way of writing it rather than the way I had imagined writing a novel like this was outlining it and then being like, all right, well, I'm going to write all of these POVs or all of these POVs and have that story kind of be complete and that whole thing.
And I mean, honestly, I feel like we owe D&D so much because we felt like we had sort of years of practice of passing the storytelling ball back and forth. And really what we were finding when we were first playing is that we would do all of this extra work, and we wanted to write elaborate backstories for our characters. And then we would actually take turns after a session. One of us would write the journal entry, sort of recapping what had happened. So we were writing tons, and we really were, it wasn't just us, and we had a DM and other people there as well. But we felt like we were already kind of doing this in a way. We were really just passing a baton around in a circle, and a story was taking form as a result. And the novel was similar, but with the benefit of actually getting to go back and revise and fix things and streamline things. So yeah.
So are there elements in the book or with the two main characters that are actually based on things from your D&D game or from your D&D characters?
Yeah, that's more the case with the older characters, right? Like the backstory of this world being based in some of the characters that we'd actually played, and imagining that they had done a really poor job. I think we drew inspiration from ourselves and from each other for the main characters.
And certainly from the characters that we enjoy playing. I always play a mage of some kind. I love elves, and I tend to play elven or half-elven characters. So that sort of got poured into Zed.
Right.
And you love playing the sort of smart aleck rogues who don't use magic and have to sort of maneuver in a world where magic is everywhere.
Right. And it's interesting because the last couple of characters I've played, I've had to deviate. I've not played a rogue in a while because I felt like I was spending so much time as a rogue and writing these books. So I've actually been experimenting a bit more with some of the players or some of the characters.
I totally identify with that, where it's like, you have your trope that you go back to, but then if you do that for 10 years, you're kind of like, all right, I know that trope. Let's try doing some others.
Fortunately, there are enough different types of spellcasters that I can
I can be a wizard, I can be a warlock.
Always a spellcaster, but there are different flavors available.
But I'm liking the elf and half elf affinity. I think you have some fans here too.
Well, I guess you could even use your D&D games as a way to try out some story hooks or character plots or something.
And that's actually something what we'd really like to do going forward. Like I said, we've been on tour a bit. We've been going into classrooms and talking to kids, and kids know D&D right now. Like it's a real moment for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your school visits.
Yeah, sorry, what's that?
I was going to ask you about the school visits.
Oh,
yeah, they've been kind of a crowd. We actually just got back from one. We had one last week where we hopped around the South a little bit. And one of the things we talk about is how we started the genesis of this and playing D&D. And we always ask the kids like whether they've heard of it, whether they know the rules. And I think even between last year and this year, we've seen kids like knowledge of the game mechanics kind of explode in this way. We always have at least one kid who comes and joins us in the back at the end to ask like, what do you play? Which edition? But kids are really aware of this game and even kind of how you play it in a way that they were not 5 years ago or even 10.
And sort of our whole program when we get up there in front of the kids is we, among other things, we have them create a character with us. So we'll sort of go around the room and we'll ask for a personality trait from one kid, and another kid will give us likes and a dislike. And it's so much fun because the kids get really into it. And of course, we always end up with totally different characters. You never get the same character twice. Although a lot of the characters end up liking like chicken nuggets.
Yeah, some end up sillier than others. Yes. Some get very earnest about it, and some do not.
Yeah.
So we're really finding that kids are sort of receptive to the idea of telling a story together, and this idea that like you could actually craft a character that is all of ours instead of something that you're just doing alone by yourself.
Yeah, I imagine that part would be really fun for kids. I keep having like this fantasy. My son's in kindergarten now, and like
Nice.
I want to do something D&D with that class, but like not just overtly D&D, but like, is it a character creation? Like help them, like just guide them through like some kind of fun character, and then maybe the next week they go on like a little adventure or something. It's like I just feel like there's something.
Yeah.
Because they're just at that age where they just love the stories and they love to contribute. My son is constantly interrupting our stories to tell. Like, no. Like,
it should be like
it's
this.
like this, and
that's
let's
cool.
make him do this, and now he's going to do that.
See, my girls just love making characters. Like they
But
just
then
love the
I'm gonna say,
idea
but the
of making
character,
characters
I
and
think they
drawing
would
them.
love.
Yeah.
Right.
I was really proud, Dad. Was it 3 or 4 nights ago where they pulled out what they wanted to read that night was Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Awesome.
And I was like, okay, let's read about some subclasses.
Yep. The monster manual's been in our rotation for a while.
That's a good one too, because it just got the great pictures of the thing, and then you can kind of there's enough of being like, hey, this is like an encyclopedia entry on this monster.
Yeah, when I brought a bunch of the core rule books to his after school program, and it just warms my heart when I go to pick them up at the end of the day, and there's usually like a lot of little girls who are just like flipping through the monster manual. Like I saw one of them like really studying the Dungeon Master screen, like reading all the stuff on the back of it. I'm like, and I always knew she would be a DM. Like you could just like since she was 3 years old.
She's a leader.
Very much so. Very bossy. Like very take charge.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cultivate that.
Yes, for sure. But I love that. I was reading all about your school visits, and I thought, oh, that's got to be so much fun. Maybe a little frustrating sometimes, but fun for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have nephews who I'm very excited to run a game for, but I haven't done it yet. But they're asking questions about it.
Yeah.
And they're 2 boys, and they're very competitive with each other and with their friends. So what they've actually gotten fixated on is the idea of the skills, and the idea that you can't be good at everything. You have to actually like pick the 2 skills you want to be good at. And it's kind of in their mind because they're used to playing games where like you can do whatever you want. I want to do everything. I want to be the best. And that's actually something that I think has opened their mind to some storytelling ideas that they weren't picking up on before.
Yeah, that you need to work together as a group. I mean, that's kind of
good for them.
No one person can do it all.
It's like a school project.
Yep.
But way more fun.
But way more fun. Yeah, exactly. I usually turn most of my school projects into some kind of role playing, though. That was the secret to make it more fun. Was like, let's put on a show, and it'll be very
so Greg Tito,
very D&D like.
Let's put on a show.
Dun, 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 dun.
I have definitely invoked some of my rogue characters when having difficult conversations at work.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Times where I would be very nervous. I think, well, no, like I know how my character would do this. I'll just role play that.
Just steal somebody's wallet.
What would Brock
and
do?
go shopping.
That takes a lot of practice.
No matter how many times I tried to throw a fireball at my mom, it never worked.
No, they never really go off the way you expect them to.
Usually just got water all over
It's
them.
nice to imagine. But I saw also that you visit gaming clubs at schools too. Which is
so that's something we haven't actually really had a chance to do yet. We put that up. We put that out there because it's something we want to do.
Yeah.
We have visited some after-school book clubs who are specifically really into fantasy. But that's kind of the next stage, and what we really want to be doing is the idea that we could run a workshop or visit a gaming club and sort of show how one thing can lead to another, how sort of gaming and writing can really work hand in hand.
Yeah. I know. I like the idea that these kids are learning. Like, I think you even have it on your website. Like, your geeky hobby can turn into a career.
Yeah, right.
So
and that's a kind of a big part of our message.
Yeah.
We go in and we just admit from the very beginning with our very first slide that we are huge nerds, and we tell them about all the nerdy things that we love. And you see some kids sort of looking at us sort of skeptically, but there are some who just kind of perk up.
Aww.
And we sort of get to talk about like we didn't know we could become writers. Writing seemed really intimidating, but we were doing this stuff anyway. We had our nerdy loves, and we just kind of poured that into a story.
How have you stayed disciplined to continue writing? I mean, as someone who identifies with having a lot of unfinished projects out there, What's the push?
Well,
like, you know,
everything changes once you sign up a series, because you know we started book 1 in I think early 2014, and it wasn't published until late 2017. So there was a lot of time for us to get it right and to share it with writing groups and get feedback. And but then when we actually signed up with a publisher for book 1, they signed up books 2 and 3 at the same time. So we've had to write these sequels under an actual deadline.
Yeah. Suddenly,
deadlines
we're doing became a little bit more like work.
Yes.
But it was great. And, you know, Nick and I, having a writing partner actually kind of, I think, really helped in this regard. We both had tons of unfinished projects, but if Nick handed me a chapter and I read the end of it and I was just so excited, I suddenly had this impetus to continue. And then I could cut the chapter off and be like, you know what? I'm done here. Yep. Nick, it's your turn.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea.
I do too. Like being able to get to like a, because what that does is create a whole bunch of smaller internal deadlines, but with also instant gratification. Because
yes,
you know, if you're alone by yourself writing an entire novel, you're like, you finished a chapter. Who are you gonna give it to?
Nobody cares.
There's no one to tell you how great you are. Exactly. Right. And to keep writing. I want to see what happens next, right? And I think when I was the most prolific was when I was in writing classes, where it was like you needed to bring something in the next week,
and you get that feedback.
And you get that feedback, but then you also be like, oh, I got to have something to turn in, or you know, that's really crappy of me not to have something, right? So, yeah, it's creating that for you know, for each individual author that's out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, set up accountability.
Yeah.
Be accountable to someone, and you'll actually get it done. And certainly, if someone says that I have something due in a year, I'm not going to start it for 11 months. But
yeah.
If I have a chapter due to Zach, and I'm seeing Zach for lunch, and he's going to ask where the chapter is.
Yeah. What's the turnaround time for chapters? Like how often or how long does it take to?
I think Nick's a little slower.
I am a little slower.
But that's why we have those weekly lunch meetings.
Yes. But when pressed, I have been able to churn out a chapter in a couple of days. But when left to my own devices, I need a couple of weeks. I need time to really sit with it and think about it. And even though I don't like to plot, so that often means that I'm coming into a chapter and it's a total blank page. And I just really like the time to sort of plot by myself before I actually start the writing, and that takes time.
Sounds like you guys have a lot of skills that you can't be good at everything. A little skill, like
you balance each other.
Yeah, right.
You know, and in our day jobs, Nick was once a book editor, and I still am a book editor. So we work these kind of book schedules all the time. It's kind of part and parcel for our lives at this point. So we're familiar, at least, with how this stuff gets off the ground and how you manage a schedule.
Yeah, and Zach in particular was the editor for a series called Spirit Animals.
Yeah.
It was published by Scholastic, which was great and had this gaming component, but it was also a series where every book was written by a different author. So Zach actually kind of has this professional experience of corralling these different visions into a cohesive whole, and he was essentially a lore master.
I was kind of the DM, for this story. I
cool.
had an even larger document than the one that we were working with, and I got to crack the whip for fantasy continuity in this series in a way that was a little fun. Got to be the rules lawyer.
There you go. It's fun to be that once in a while.
Right. It needs to make sense within the world. So what happens if a chapter doesn't get turned in at the right moment?
They are no longer best friends.
Are there? Yeah, I know, right? Is that what happened?
Best friend status revoked.
A snarky GIF gets thrown your way.
Right. Yeah. As the series goes, we have been a little looser with our deadlines, but by and large, there's not too much whip cracking. I don't know. You can speak to this better.
Well, and I mean, honestly, Zach and I share so much of our social lives that I'll tell him like, hey, I really plan to have this chapter done, but we're supposed to play D&D tonight, and tomorrow we're going to a concert, so I'm really going to need, unless you think I should just cancel and not do this.
Wow.
Oh. That does not work well. I'm sensing that there is at least one of you who is more strict about deadlines.
Yep. I have that same sense. Not going to name names, but I think we both know.
But it's Shelley.
That's also how we're doing it with your friends. One of you needs to care about deadlines.
Yeah, and that goes with the the whole partnership here of having your skills mesh. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And do your styles mesh too? Like, do you guys have a similar writing style? Is it easy for the reader to tell who's writing which chapter, or we're not supposed to know? Or?
Our friends tell us they can tell the different chapters apart and could from the beginning. Readers who don't know us well have not been quite so sure. And people have asked us, even upon reading it, how did you do this? Did you alternate the viewpoints? Which I think is a good sign that the chapters mesh pretty well.
I was worried for a while because I think we do definitely have our different strengths and weaknesses. And there were times where I was afraid there would be almost a whiplash sensation moving from Zach does these just wonderfully sad and serious. He does the
I'm a little bit of a pathos junkie.
And then I always go for the joke. I can't, no matter how dire the situation, my characters are making jokes. But that seems to have actually worked out, and on the whole, it feels balanced.
Yeah.
And it's challenged me to be funnier. I'm writing Nick's character, Brock, is just so funny. And in Nick's chapters, he's just constantly cracking me up. So I know that I have to get at least a good joke or two when he's in my chapters. So it's been a fun exercise in broadening my abilities.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So if, you're writing a character from your point of view, but then the other character is in those scenes.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of discussion? Are you ever like, oh, my character would never say that type things?
Yeah. Do you feel possessive about your characters?
I mean, I definitely pay attention. I take a close look, but I feel like we've done a good job of sort of explaining in the books and to each other who these characters are, and we're really respectful about it.
I'll say that Nick occasionally writes Zed, gives him a trait that's something I totally wouldn't have thought of, but it only ever kind of enriches him for me. You'll write him in a way that suddenly it's like, I never would have thought of this, but I love it, and I'm so happy to pick up this baton and run with it a little further.
Right.
Yeah, you guys are too good.
I know. I was just gonna say, I'd be like, no.
Seriously.
Brock is way funnier.
You're not funny.
Maybe that is a funny joke, but it's not the joke that I would make for Brock.
Why are you always gonna be crying?
I'm gonna write all of your characters. Zed's crying because he's a little baby. See, this is why Michelle and I are not.
We should try to write a book together.
Let's do it. But they're so good at it. We'd be like,
well, maybe
screw
it
this.
brings them closer. Maybe, I don't know. We're about to play Betrayal Legacy and murder each other in a field somewhere.
Let's do it better. Let's play Diplomacy, then play Legacy,
and then write a book.
And then write a book together. All right, this is gonna be good.
That sounds like a very full weekend.
It's
totally.
It's gonna take like 4 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man! So you're in the middle of writing the third book now,
or revising.
Revising. Oh, so you've already done the chapter back and forth, and you're done.
Yeah.
Wait, how do you revise it?
Due to our editor today.
Yes.
But you had a podcast. Well, you were doing promotions, basically.
Yeah.
This is key.
This is important.
So with the revising, how does that work? Do you go back to your own individual chapters, or?
We do it back and forth, and I'll say that's probably not the most efficient way to do it, but it's kind of just the way we have to.
Right.
If we have to go back and change something in earlier chapters, we do, but I think we just have to do it sequentially. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm doing as I work through the revision is, if it's my turn to look at my chapter 6, I will reread Zach's chapter 5 to see any changes he's made this round. Then I'll reread my chapter 6 and address the editor's concerns. And then I'll read a bit into chapter 7 to make sure that the flow is sort of there.
Mm.
So in some ways, the revision feels like a lot more work, and is in some ways as time consuming as writing, because then you end up rereading some of the same chapters over and over. Yeah. But we do try to respect one another's writing in that case. So I'm not going in and making changes to Zach's chapters. I will weigh in if the editor has flagged something in his chapter, and I might say, I agree or I don't agree, or let's talk about this. And I also feel like the revision is kind of where we leave notes for each other.
Yeah.
Because to do that in the drafting process could really derail things unless there's a big problem. So this is really kind of our opportunity to give each other feedback and to say, even just a simple level of like, this joke isn't landing or something like that. That happens in this stage.
About how long are the chapters that you guys are talking about in length?
I think my chapters tend to be a little too long. So for book 3, we've been a little more conscious about that. There are some which in a Word doc might be as few as 6 or 7 pages, and some that almost get up to 20.
Right. Yeah, we're writing for kids, so we really try to keep it short and give them nice breaks in between. But we're also writing for fantasy readers. So I think with the first book, we did a good job of keeping everything really short and moving quickly. And then in the second book, we relaxed a little bit, and we thought, if they read the first book and they came back for this, like they're gonna cut us some slack if we want to have a 20-page chapter. Also, with book 1, our 2 characters were always in the same place at the same time, and in book 2, we wanted to switch things up,
branch out.
Yeah, so there were times where Zach just had a lot of plot to cover when it was his turn to write a chapter, because his character was seeing something that my character wasn't seeing.
I see.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, because that was one part of the discussion we hadn't got to, was like, how much material are you guys sending back and forth? But if it's only, up to kind of 20 pages on a Word doc, that's not too much to kind of, digest at one time.
It's not too intense, and writing for kids is, I think, a little less intimidating. And certainly when you're talking about not plotting ahead or not outlining ahead, I think with the kids' books and our experience as editors, we kind of have this natural sense of when things need to turn, and when Act 1 is done and you're getting into a second act. I think writing an adult novel would be a whole different story. And also, I feel like a lot of the adult fantasy I read, there are a lot more points of view. You're floating around quite a bit in a way that doesn't happen as much with kids' books.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Zach, you edit children's books?
Yes.
So did you also, Nick? Were you in children's
books? I
did.
That was my job. That's basically what I moved to New York to do. I moved in 2004 and just quit last year to focus on writing full time.
And you were doing children's books or all kinds of books?
Children's books, yeah.
So we worked at the same company and worked on kind of similar things. When Nick left the company, I ended up inheriting a lot of his projects.
Yes.
You guys even worked at the same company?
I know. We used to get coffee every day.
Oh my God.
Is that how you guys met? Was that the job?
No, we met actually in Florida. We both grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and we both went to school in Gainesville, but we're 5 years apart. So we didn't end up at the same school at any point until Zach was in college and I was working for the university. They had an academic press, University Press of Florida. And I lived in a house that was known as the Sea Turtle House, because it was, during the day, it was a front office for a nonprofit that helped tropical sea life. Oh. During the night, I hosted these raging parties.
Gainesville was a party town.
Yeah. So Zach showed up at one of these parties wearing a giant tropical shirt, and because of the tropical connection.
And Nick lent me his. We started talking about comics, and Nick lent me his very favorite comic series at the time, which was Runaways. He said, "You have to read this," and they were in these pristine plastic guards. And I was not a very responsible book borrower. I think I took them to the beach sometime, and they got very sandy.
I couldn't believe the condition he returned my comics in.
Oh no!
Those I think are actually worth something now.
They would be if they didn't have sand all over them. And suntan lotion.
I sort of had this wonderful epiphany where I thought, because he loved the books and we got to talk about them, and I thought, I could have these things sealed up in pristine condition in the bottom of my closet, or they could have been shredded and dragged through the dirt. But I have a friend who wants to talk about this stuff, and that's way a good trade-off. So
that's super sweet.
Yeah, we both seem like nice guys, but Nick is actually the nice guy. He's very patient with me.
That's sweet.
That is pretty sweet, right? You got a friend out of or you could have had some really expensive.
Or you could be retired now, but you got a friend.
D&D was kind of a similar experience where neither of us had played it before as kids. I was actually always interested, but I kind of came up during the moral panic phase, and like my parents weren't cool with it.
Yeah.
So I was always really curious about what it was, and Zach was this huge fantasy fan. And we just had a mutual friend basically give us the Player's Handbook for the 4th edition, and we were just
totally obsessed. Just like 2 weeks of constant texts and IMs. Like, did you see this? I think I want to do this.
We got no work done. And then we were on vacation a few years later when 5th edition came out.
We went on a vacation to Maine with our friends. It was just like 2 days in this secluded, wonderful cabin.
Beautiful, beautiful area.
But
super relaxing.
5th edition Player's Handbook came out this weekend. So we took one of the cars and basically disappeared for one of the days while we chased gaming stores trying to find like the 2 copies of this that existed in all of Maine.
Right.
Oh, that's so funny.
Did you find it?
We did. Yes. Yep. I think we had to go to like 3 or 4 places because it was the pre-release for the
before
the gaming stores. So yeah, it was quite a find that weekend.
That's cool. You were working here at that time.
Yeah. I was working on D&D.
That's right. And in Maine, you probably saw Rob Davio.
Yeah. In Wet Hot American Summer.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Counselors on their heroin bender, whatever. Probably got some soft serve ice cream, did some mini golf.
All the things you do, and then you played some D&D.
And played some D&D.
Yeah. And I'm a little obsessed with the blueberry milk they have up there, which is nowhere else in the world.
Blueberry milk?
Oh, yeah. It's incredible.
What is?
No one else in our vacation group likes it, but it is incredible.
You really have to drink milk, take on large quantities of milk, and if that's the case, and you also like blueberries.
Is it like a powder, like a blueberry powder you mix into your milk, or
no? It's like this local Maine
blueberry
cows. Chocolate. They've got strawberry, and then inexplicably there is this blue one that's sort of lined up with the others. And I was fascinated by it the first time we went, and have since bought like gallons and gallons of it every time we go.
It does a body good.
Maybe not in those quantities.
Excellent. Well, I love everything that you guys have been talking about. I love the process you've forged of sending stuff back and forth.
I'm inspired.
Yeah, I know, right?
Okay.
You've actually finished books before, so you're like, you're already got a leg up.
But I could finish them even faster if I had a buddy.
All you need is a partner.
Let's do it.
All right.
Okay.
You can be I was going to say the name might.
Nope.
No, we'll save that for off the podcast. Thank you guys so much for calling in. It was a great conversation, and I can't wait to pick these up. Do you think so? My daughter is 7. Do you think she?
Oh, she's ready.
Is ready to jump in to the Adventurers Guild?
Especially if she is a fantasy fan, she will.
The monsters get a little scary, but if she can handle that, for sure, yeah.
She'll love it.
Nice. All right, cool. Well, we'll jump in because it sounds like it's touches all the right buttons for that kind of a story, and she loves it. So. And
what is the website for the book?
Yeah, it's a dayofdangers.com.
Day of Dangers.
Day of Dangers.
And it's the Adventurers Guild is the name of the series and the first novel, right?
Yes, correct. And it is out in hardcover, audiobook, ebook, paperback. Any way you like your books, it's available.
And book 2 just came out.
Book 2 just came out,
right.
And book 3 will be out in about a year.
Good holiday gifts.
The Revenge of the Elves. Wait, no. Twilight of the Elves.
They have a bad day, those elves.
Those elves are not great.
Well, if you ever need someone to read the audiobook, I know Shelly's got some skills.
Some voice.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I could read it like C-3PO, maybe.
All right.
Oh, dude. That's it.
These elves are attacking me.
Oh, it's Twilight.
I am on Team Elf. All right. Well, thank you. Hope you survived the hot swampiness of Brooklyn. And I can't wait to get back there. It's been a while, so soak it all up.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. We had a blast. Thanks so much for having us.
Good luck with your revisions.
Yes, revise away.
We hope you stay best friends forever. BFF.
Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Excellent.
Adorable.
I love it. I love everything that they just talked about. I could talk about writing and D&D and Maine forever.
I think that I just love that, the process.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's super interesting.
Yeah.
I want to jump in.
It works.
Yeah. All right. Those of you watching us on Twitch, thank you for being with us for these last 2 hours of nonstop fun.
Nonstop. Wow. Time flies.
Time does fly, right? It's crazy. I'm glad you didn't have your meeting that you had to go to.
I hope I didn't.
I know, right?
I think you're in it now.
I know. It got canceled, though, I think. So we're safe.
Yeah.
We're safe. But we are going to go offline now. I don't have my computer in front of me, so I don't know what's coming up next. Yeah. I usually, I've got that whole thing going on. But we're going to be back next week. We have 2 awesome guests. Devin Rue will be joining us. We'll talk about her cartography. She's done amazing artwork there. And now I'm forgetting the name of our other guest. I know his position.
I don't know.
1 second. Now I need to actually have it out for reals so that I don't get it wrong. Yes. State Senator Steve Hobbs.
Oh, stop it. That's next week?
That's next week.
Oh, fun.
He'll be in the office. We will take him around what's happening here, but he is a state senator here in Washington State.
And a big D&D fan.
I know, exactly. And he reached out to us, which is so strange.
And with an email listing his cred as to why he should be on Dragon Talk.
Exactly. He had, and there was
you had us at state senator.
We don't need your CV here, but I liked it.
I appreciate it.
It was great. Another testament to D&D being everywhere.
Yes.
So that's next week. So join us then. Of course, always follow what's going along on all of our RSS feeds. Dungeon Delve just wrapped up the podcast of Ravnica. Not just wrapped up, but it was the last time we were talking to you. So check it out. There's 10 podcast episodes up there on Dungeon Delve right now. Each of them focus on a different guild in Ravnica. There's 10 different guilds, and they're all really awesome. So check it out if you can.
I will.
There are tons of products out there. I'm not going to list them all now. I'll save those for the intros and outros. But definitely check out Betrayal Legacy if you can.
And then tell us all about it. But
This
don't
is
spoil
the
things.
exact copy that Shelly and I are going to play.
I can't wait.
We're going to mark
And Pelham.
and mark it. Pelham's playing too.
Yeah, he's in our group too.
Yeah. Ryan's in our group too.
Yeah. Come back and play, Ryan. You'll love it.
All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. You're amazing. And we'll be back next week. But we got lots of streaming happening here on the D&D Twitch channel tonight and tomorrow. So check that out too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.